Hey everybody, it's Daryl Akins of Anglers All Fly Shops and Boathouse, and today we're going to do some bucktail work. Musky fool bucktail, whiting hackles. This is my bucktail jerky. Let's go tie a fly. All right, in the vise, I've got an Ahrex Nordic Salt 172 curved Gammarus in a size 2, and I am using 100 Denier 6/0 Nano Silk. So we're going to start off with, bucktail, and some of the best bucktail on the planet here from Musky Fool. So when you break down a bucktail, as far as what you're going to use for your fly, you can really kind of start looking at this bucktail and pick from a particular part of the bucktail to give you the right type of hair that you need for the task at hand. So I'm going to, at the tail portion of this fly, so I don't want a lot of flare at this tail portion, so I will operate from the upper portion of this bucktail. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this out to hit right at or under my material clip. I'm going to use the adhesive that I do use for bucktail, which is Liquid Fusion. Liquid Fusion takes a little longer to actually fully cure. And the advantage that we're given because of that is we're able to manipulate our bucktail and actually get it to do what we want it to do and get it where we want it before our adhesive actually seizes up on us. So that's the advantage to actually working with something like Liquid Fusion. Now, I don't have a ton here in this tail, right? You'll see that a lot. Sparse is more, sparse is more, less is more. I like saying sparse is more because then I don't tune out the less is more mantra, right? A couple wraps. I'm going to keep this predominantly on the top of the hook, by the way. I'm not going to wrap this all the way around because I want this to be more of a support for the next stage, the wing, the flash. So I'm going to go ahead and do what I call a taper cut off that front end, and what that does now is it kind of slopes this down, so my material bump will be a little smoother at that end. Inline cinches. Going to grab some flash here. We're all familiar with Pearl Flashabou, and then I love Krystal Flash with bucktail streamers. Just looks so good. So I'm going to grab the flash. I'm going to marry it together with my Krystal Flash and get this just longer than my tail. So you'll notice what I did there. I pinch wrap. I tend to do a lot of pinch wraps when it comes to materials that I want to make sure I'm securing to the top of the shank. Just quick, easy, and effective. So the second adhesive is going to be Zap-A-Gap. I'll do that on flash stations or after feathers. That goes on the thread and then around, and then on top of that, I'll bring back the other flash. So we get to not only tie it in and pin it, but we'll tie it in and pin it with very controlled Zap-A-Gap application. Do a tapered cut, like down, so you can taper your flash out and match the taper of the tail. So now, when we pick up our bucktail, we started up here. As you work your way down the bucktail, you're gonna get more and more flare. The hair gets hollower the closer down the bucktail you get. So I'm going to go to this middle section now, so I'll get a little bit of flare, a little more length, and a little more body, if you will, for this fly. I'm looking to match this just shy, 1/8 of an inch, quarter of an inch, just shy of that last taper. This is going to lay down with it. So I'm going to spin my thread here and there if I don't see it already wound around. That gives us a more accurate thread line. I'm going to give it a nice inline cinch. Try and avoid your 90-degree cinch. It is a weak point that we have to control. It's a necessary evil. All right, so now we're going to grab some flash. Same as we did before in the tail. We're going to use some Pearl Krystal Flash and then some purple Krystal Flash, and then Flashabou is the pearl. All right, mix them together. Get the length where I want it. I'm going to do a pinch wrap so I can really come down. I'm not going to spin those around. A little bit of zap on my thread. A couple wraps, and then we're going to pop those down. All the while paying attention to this foundation to make sure it stays as consistent as possible. So we're tying some hackle feathers now. Got a whiting saddle here. And again, I'm looking through the bottom part of my saddle where you have some smaller feathers that you can use for these smaller streamers. They're perfect for that. We're going to take these two saddle feathers and we're going to go ahead and give ourselves a little bit of personality to our fly. I'm going to spin my thread to make sure that I'm nice and roped for a really clean capture. And then I'm going to match the length by eye on this side. And then lay everything out. Now, before I do any tight cinch wraps on this, I want to make sure that I'm happy with how this is sitting, right? I can already see that it's coming up off the high end of the shoulder onto the back of the fly. Love that. That's a good position. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back. And now, before I start doing my cinching wraps, I'm going to do those cinching wraps with Zap-A-Gap thread. So nice tight wraps. Make sure those hackle feathers stay where they're supposed to stay. So we're going to do some liquid fusion here. Again, we've been honoring our base to make sure that when we go to tie our fox in, we've got that same shape happening. There, boom, a little bit. Spread that around. Clean up the butt ends. I'm going to keep that in that same window of space. I'm going to go in before we do our cinching wraps. I'm going to make sure that is where it needs to be. Your hackle feathers are a great guide for the location of both the top and the bottom of your fox, of that wing, right? Keep it right to the barring, and we'll do the same thing on the white, on the bottom, right up to the barring. I'm going to take this hook point, and it's going to go in between my fingers. So when I kind of come in, that allows me to go in and on top of that material bump without it rolling either way. Now, I haven't cinched down yet. I got some loose wraps for the most part. So you want to be careful when you pull back your fox so you don't want to do it. We don't want to cinch down yet because we want to make sure we're lined up. So I'm just going to take my bodkin ever so gently, hit L-Dub's camera, and some tight wraps. We'll grab my cautery iron. We'll clean up some of the fuzzies we have. We want to make sure we had that room up front to build. Now we will go ahead and move on to the next phase. We're going to be using living eyes. You can get any color you want. You can actually grab any 3D eye you want. For this particular fly, 4 mil, definitely the size that I feel is proportionately accurate. So third, adhesive, and they all have very specific tasks. Loctite, a little bit of Loctite on that side. And we're going to do our first eye. And you want to make sure that when you put these eyes on, that if you spend good money on an eye, make sure it's in the proper orientation or facing the right way. That way, you just did not buy expensive eyes and just throw them on. We don't want that. Alton Brown would say that's not good eats. So what I'm doing, nothing more than making sure that that bad boy is deadlock center where I want it. Now, from this orientation, I love it, but it means nothing. I need to see what this looks like head on. So a lot of times I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to look and double check to make sure that I don't have any adjustments on that eye. So now when you look at it, it's perfectly level and straight and not crooked. Now we'll do the same thing on the other side. And this is where it gets kind of wonky. At least it does for me. It's the opposite side. Our POV for the fly on that side in this upside down manner is not normal. So there are times where your angle may be off. So what I like to do is mimic exactly where I put that one, but on this side. And then I can adjust from there. So I'm happy with where those are sitting. They're even. I've got really good equidistance above and below my material bump. Now we're going to get some Solarez Flex. It's about a medium viscosity. I really dig the Flex. It gives us a little more, I think, when we fish. We don't have a hard UV head or wing back or something that may crack. So the Flex definitely gives us a little give with physical flies. So I'm looking to kind of drop dollop here. Now, that's a little too much, so I'm going to go in, instead of pulling it out this way, I'm going to go in this way and pull it out and just roll it on the bodkin, just like that. Wipe it off with my paper towel, clean up my hook eye, and then what's going to happen is everything's going to kind of just seep around where I pulled that out. Upside down to make sure it doesn't go anywhere on me. Gravity will help me. It's all going to pull down. So now I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm on pulse, and I'm going to cook this from a distance. My standard 4 to 6 inches away. I'm always going to increase and come in on the times the light is blinking off. My goal is to prevent any evaporation, which will ensure that my, my UV head is as durable as it can be. So that's the first phase at the top. Now we go to the first phase on the bottom, and we're going to rinse and repeat. I'm going to take a dollop of UV. And build out the bottom. And by doing this in phases, what we're allowing ourselves is a more durable fly. We're allowing ourselves to have a fly that'll fish longer, and we're allowing ourselves to have a UV head that, if we're going to take the time to build, will last. So take your time with your bodkin and kind of getting all the nooks and the crannies, because as it settles in, it's going to be exactly where you want it. It's just going to settle into those nooks and crannies. That first base application should be like the foundation application of our UV. Cook that in. Now I can take a little more, and I'm going to apply this to the top and the bottom. I'll take a little more UV just to kind of help shape out the head. It's a little different having to apply the resin to an already built head. So take your time with it. Don't rush it. It'll all work out. The more of these you do, and you're taking your time, you're going to be amazed at how easy this can be. So I'm pretty darn happy with the top of that head there, right? So I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, just a little more, and then finish rounding it out. And by doing this in phases, you're not going to allow this fly to just crack and then be done. If you do it in phases like this, and you are physical, and it does happen to crack, because we did several phases and stages of UV, it's going to hold up. It's going to last a little longer. It's still going to fish for you. There we go. I know you're probably thinking this is crazy, but if you're just diligently slow and meticulous, you'll be very happy with the outcome. So now we have two different stages in the top and the bottom. So now we're going to finish up with bone dry. We've got our UV for the middle and the top. You don't want a totally dry brush, but you still want some UV on the brush. So go ahead and apply some to one eye, and then brush the other eye, and then we're just going to kind of brush with our rotary all the way around and fill in some of the spots, level things out, and just build out a head that we're happy with. Don't let it drop down on your material. And by looking at this as like a leveling UV, and you can always dry your brush, put it on the fly, and pick up the extra that way. I'm going to keep this moving because the bone dry, the viscosity is super, super thin. If you stop, it's going to work against you. Same thing, I'm going to kind of pulse this from afar. I'm going to come in on my down pulses and bake this and cook this out without any evaporation. At least that's visible. And then I'll cook this straight on, one last for durability. There you go. That's the Bucktail Jerky. It's a super easy, super quick bucktail bait fish pattern that you can spin up. 2 stations of bucktail, flash, and some fox. Mix in some whiting hackles, and you will not be disappointed. Bucktail Jerky. Tie 'em up, buy 'em up.